The Silver Saber sailed north. The Silver Saber sailed. The Silver Saber... Goddamn. Their business concluded on Fort Yarakir, Zelene Silvers offered to ferry the menagerie to Harashta for a price. Faced with a difficult choice, Umber was forced to either cost the company most of the proceeds they'd collected from the fort, or to share a bed with the Pirate Queen for one night. While he was perfectly willing, he wasn't so sure that his current lover, Dunya Dragonbane, former Queen of Coom, would be as well. When he brought it to her attention, Dunya, wanting to appear carefree and libertine, gave her consent, but it slowly became obvious to everyone involved that their relationship was not likely to survive the experience. Nonetheless, Umber took Zelene up on her offer and saved the company the expense of the voyage. The Silver Saber sailed north. The Silver Saber sailed north from Fort Yarakir, crossing the Draconic Ocean to reach Harashta and the true beginning of the Cradle contract. While en route, Unicorn finally reconnected with Will-O-Wisp, the half-elven leader of the company's artillery, one of Unicorn's old flings, and the woman that Remorhaz has been infatuated with since their time in the Night Wars. Remorhaz, meanwhile, shared private words with another Night Wars veteran, an anxious human woman named Displacer, who warned him to discourage the commander from straying too close to a certain site on their march to Throkus Cradle. Umber, meanwhile, consulted his mother Chimera about the whole Dunya situation, and also, more saliently, what awaited them in Throkus Cradle among his father's people. Of the 3 allied cities of the Harashta League, the company chose to make landfall in Sundaport, the largest, the most cosmopolitan, and the most affluent. This would prove to be a delicate operation, because the cities of the Schism had recently declared war on Throkus Cradle, the company's client, and come the spring, the menagerie would most likely be obliged to do battle with the city of Sundaport, the city that they were currently passing through. The task, then, was to resupply the company for a long march into the mountains, to possibly gather some intelligence about the enemy's military strength, and to do it all without arousing suspicion that they were actually hired by the city's new adversary. It was Unicorn who exploited this fact to charm his way past the city's contract commissioner, allowing him to assume that the menagerie was here to join the war against Throkus Cradle. While Umber schmoozed several merchants in the city's Grand Bazaar, the task of gathering intelligence fell to Remorhaz. While chatting with the rank and file of the rival mercenaries, Remorhaz learned of the city's vast wealth, its thin motivations for war, and the 3 mercenary companies it had hired. The Fortunate Fellows, the She-Serpents, and of course, a chapter of the Iron Word, not led by Yorgos of Nair, but instead by a reckless dragonborn warlord known only as Thunderbolt. It was Unicorn, however, who would first run afoul of these troops. While the siege engineers relaxed outside one of Legionary Point's many cafes, the charming paladin attempted to comfort a bewildered Kosava bracebow, still caught in the whirlwind of Dredgar's death and Yazram's exile. No sooner had he done so, however, than a sudden ambush. Iron Word soldiers appearing from everywhere attacked the hapless siege engineers who were completely unprepared for a fight. With his companions blocks distant, Unicorn alone stepped up to defend the dwarven engineers. And that's where we ended the session. How did it go? I think it was a really nice sort of transitional session. There's a lot of world building the party has to kind of learn about the politics of the different parties involved. And this was a nice chance to kind of intro that to them and to introduce some of our villains we're going to be encountering in these 3 mercenary companies. I think the big conflict of the episode was centered around Dunya and Umber and this kind of question of Umber's loyalty and, his future plans with her. The whole point of reintroducing Zelene was to kind of challenge Umber and see if he really wants to be in this relationship with Dunya, and so this really kind of came to a head. Them breaking up is sort of what I think Steven wants. He doesn't like Umber being tied to this person. He wants Umber to be this kind of freewheeling character. And I think it fits with Dunya's arc to sort of have this realization, like maybe I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I abandoned my kingdom and joined this mercenary company. So I'm curious to see where her character goes, especially whether or not she receives this bone treatment in Throkus Cradle. Now might be a good time to talk about Remorhaz. So, long story short, Remorhaz and Willow fought together in the Night Wars, and Rem felt head over heels for her, but he never quite managed to make it work. She at one point had made a passing reference to how she really admired the Vayudaria, the sword fighting style, the way without hands. And so Remorhaz devoted himself entirely to perfecting it. Remorhaz is, if nothing else, a perfectionist. He always takes on more responsibilities than he can handle because he doesn't trust anyone else to do them. So he spent years trying to teach himself this style in the hope that it would impress Willow. Over the past 2 arcs, he has kind of grappled with the fact that his identity is so tied up in his relationship with Willow. And Willow, who is called Will-O-Wisp because she has a tendency to, pick up lovers and drop them, doesn't necessarily know. Like, they sort of like to flirt with Rem, but is Rem really right for them, right? In this most recent arc, Remorhaz has decided to put down the sword and kind of metaphorically put down his obsession and his crush on Willow, hoping to get to know her better as a person and less as just like an object of his adoration. So in order to challenge him, I liked the idea of reintroducing a character, a previous sort of fling of Willow's, which we've established she's had several, but we've never actually seen one in the company. And that's where Kate's character Unicorn comes in. So a big part of introducing Kate's character was to say, what if you were one of Willow's old lovers who kind of comes back into her life? And so it's to kind of test Remorhaz and see, like, are you cool? Are you going to be weird if Willow either flirts with, maybe reconnects with, or even is just friends with Unicorn again? How is Rem, the kind of like new reformed Rem, going to deal with that, right? Part and parcel with what we talked about last time, the idea that Rem is trying to try archery. Willow is the leader of the artillery, and she's an archer, and so she's kind of teaching him archery sort of as a metaphor for like teaching him to let go of his need to always be perfect and his need to control everything. So let me talk a little bit about the world building here. As we're going into Throkus Cradle, this is a war between 2 different powers. We have Throkus Cradle, who are the sort of like an orcish Garden of Eden. This is believed to be where the orcish civilization first began. And they have basically remained the same ever since. They are led by Throkathrak, who is this ancient, 1,000-year-old orcish leader. The way that orcs work in my world is that as long as their community stays together, the leader continues to live. So they can live to be as old, if not older, than elves and dwarves, depending on how sort of strong of a leader or a Throck they are. So you have Throkus Cradle in one area, this like beautiful like Edenic valley that the orcs of the Throka Corv, the kind of like Throka clan or tribe or whatever, the orcish term is Corv. And after a political incident involving a couple of dead diplomats that we have yet to learn more about, they're going to war with the 3 cities of the Schism, the 3 cities of the Harashta League. One of the weird things about Throkathrak as a character is that because he's so old, he has had many generations of children. So Umber is one of his kids, yes, with Chimera, but he has had many other generations too. The Harashta League was founded by one of his children that he had 500 years ago, who splintered off from him and founded her own civilization. The orcs of Throkus Cradle kind of hold to these old traditionalist beliefs, whereas the orcs of Harashta have modernized a little bit, and they are embracing new ideas from across the ocean. And so that's kind of the primary conflict here. The Throkus Cradle arc in general is about change. It's about character change, yes. Can Umber take more responsibility? Griffin's going to deal with some of his lycanthropy stuff. Can Remorhaz change into a new person, right? And can Throkus Cradle change to adapt to sort of the modern world, especially if they're threatened with extinction? So right now, as they're in Sundaport, this is one of the 3 cities they're going to be going to war with. Each one of these cities has 3 military scores. They have a might score, a resource score, and a will score. Might determines their military strength, resources determines their wealth, and will determines their, the determination in the fight, how much they want this war. So they sort of got a sense that, okay, Sundaport is the richest city, but it's got the worst willpower. So if we're going to try to, dismantle their military, that's probably the way to do it, is kind of break their will to fight. Whereas the other cities might have different scores depending. So just a little taste of the politics. That's one of the big things in Menagerie that I like to do, is I like to talk about, national narrative, and I like to talk about political situations and complex, ideas of statehood and things like that. That's a big theme in the campaign, and it's going to be fun to explore it here with this kind of like orcish bend. We had kind of an undead and draconic view in Vakizla, then we did a lot about dwarves in Coom, and now we're kind of looking at an orcish society. On a more immediate level, though, Unicorn is about to be in a very, very serious fight. We'll talk about the way I do mass combat, maybe more in a future episode, but the way it works is that each side has a couple of units, they're going to fight each other, and meanwhile, the players can choose one of those units to engage in a more traditional Dungeons & Dragons style combat. But right now, because Unicorn is all alone, they are there to defend the siege engineers. So Unicorn is basically going to have to take on an entire encounter balanced for a whole party all by themselves for a couple of rounds. The way I did it mechanically is I just had everyone roll me a d4, and that tells me how far away they are. We started with Unicorn where he was, and now it's several rounds before the other characters can come in. And the question is whether or not Unicorn can hold his own. As a paladin, I think he's probably the best situated to do that, but we'll have to see. Great, and that was the episode. I think it went really well. We're playing again tonight, so I'm excited to see whether Unicorn can hold the line and protect not only himself, but also the siege engineers before his allies get there. Unfortunately, the bell and the subscribe button are kind of having relationship troubles right now, so maybe, it might help cheer him up if you give him a click, maybe each one, spread the love around a little bit. This episode, as always, is made possible by our patrons, so if you like this show, please consider joining them if you want to see more episodes like this. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy adventuring.